welcome to the Library Garden Series. My name is Sarah Haig. I'm a Dare County Extension Master Gardener volunteer. I'm looking forward to sharing some important information with you about native plants and how you can enjoy them in your own backyard here along the Outer Banks. Many people are aware of the benefits of native plants as an important part of the natural environment, where they provide a critical role in supporting wildlife and pollination. Today, we will talk about our local ecosystem and the various types of landscapes found along the Outer Banks. We will discuss why plants in general, and native plants in particular, are important to life on Earth, along with the special role native plants have in our ecosystems. We'll look at some steps homeowners can take to create habitats for plants and animals, and give you some specific ideas of native plants to try in your yard and tips for their care. And finally, we'll offer some additional resources for those who'd like to learn more. You need only drive south on Route 12 through the Cape Hatteras National Seashore to see plenty of native plants. At different times of the year, there may be variation in color and form, but for the most part, you'll see wind-swept, wild-looking shrubs, dense marsh grasses, and sparser-looking dune grasses, plenty of pine trees covered in vines, and the occasional blooming flowers of yuccas, seashore mallow, or goldenrod. Birds and other wildlife are plentiful, and the landscape has a natural beauty that exemplifies the Outer Banks ecosystem. The Outer Banks and Roanoke Island are part of the Carolinian Barrier Islands and Coastal Marshes Level 4 ecoregion, quite a mouthful, as defined by the Environmental Protection Agency. Our narrow strip of land has distinctive geology, landforms, soils, vegetation, climate, land use, hydrology, and wildlife. Understanding our unique ecosystem helps us to understand which plants have been best adapted to life here. In general, the native plants that have evolved to survive on our barrier islands can handle sandy soils, salt spray, lots of wind, hot, humid summers, and occasional flooding. It is a harsh but naturally beautiful environment, and the plants that can survive here are tough. Within the Outer Banks, there are many different types of yards and microclimates, often based on proximity to the water and the elevation of the land. Places closest to the water and in open areas bear the brunt of the prevailing winds, with strong, cold north or northeast winds in winter and strong, hot southwest winds in summer. Summers can be very humid and have periods of drought. Some neighborhoods with more shelter from the salt winds have plenty of tall trees to create shade, such as neighborhoods on Roanoke Island or in southern shores. Soils vary from very sandy to somewhat sandy to almost like regular soil depending on location. Some yards are prone to flooding and need methods of adapting to periodic standing water. And beyond the climate and soil factors that affect what will grow, some homeowners have special desires to use plantings to increase privacy or improve a view. Understanding the setting of your own yard and existing plantings is important as you think about how to enhance your landscaping with native plants. When we think of nature-enhancing landscaping, we must consider how readily it can be maintained, or its sustainability. We are more likely to maintain landscapes that are attractive to ourselves and our neighbors. A sustainable coastal landscape is environmentally friendly, considering surrounding ecology and creatures, not just human neighbors. For example, landscaping that creates wildlife habitat is inviting to songbirds and butterflies, along with other animals. Landscaping that is well adapted to the coast considers the region's sunlight, temperatures, precipitation, hydrology, salt and soils, and is storm-ready, helping to protect our homes from hurricane damage. Finally, a sustainable coastal landscape is functional and enjoyable. If our landscaping accommodates outdoor activities, we'll be more likely to spend time outside and to maintain our yards. Regardless of the specific type of landscape, plants play an important role. They are critical to life on Earth as the key foundation of the food web. Plants harvest the sun's energy through photosynthesis, converting it into a form animals may use. Insects and other herbivores eat plants and in turn are eaten by other animals, and thus all species higher up the food chain rely on plants to survive. Plants and the animals they support are part of the larger ecosystem of a given area, and this web works best when the plants and the animals they support have evolved to work well together. So what are native plants? Native plants are those that have evolved naturally in a given area over thousands of years, adapting to local soil and climate conditions and forming interdependent relationships with other species. Native plants have learned how to live and prosper in a given geographic location, and they provide food for animals that have learned to use specific plants for food and reproduction. Plants and animals work together to sustain natural processes that support the food web, forming an efficient ecosystem. Native plants are especially effective in providing food resources for insects that we rely on for pollination of all types of plants, including vegetables, fruits, and wild plants. Many native plants produce showy flowers, abundant fruits and seeds, and brilliant fall foliage. They provide protective cover for most animals: seeds, nuts, and fruits for squirrels and other mammals, seeds, fruits, and insects for birds, and nectar for hummingbirds and butterflies. If plants native to an area are replaced by plants from other regions, native insects and the species that rely upon them may not be able to persist in that area. Adding native plants to your landscape will help restore food resources and provide habitat for wildlife, and will give you chances to interact with birds, butterflies, pollinators, and other species in your own yard. Plants and animals have evolved together and rely on each other. For example, there are at least 16 species of blueberry shrubs that are native to North Carolina. The southeastern blueberry bee, a type of ground nesting bee, relies on blueberries and other early flowering native plants for its survival. These bees pollinate the blueberries so they can bear fruit, and the bees live on the nectar from the blueberry flowers. Some insects have developed highly specialized relationships with specific plants. Monarch butterflies are a well-known example of such specialized adaptation. The survival of monarch butterflies depends on plants in the genus Asclepias, commonly known as butterfly weed or milkweed. Monarch caterpillars cannot feed on any other plant genus. If Asclepias species disappear from a region, so do monarchs. These relationships may not be replicated when native plants are replaced with plants from other regions. I'd like to briefly mention invasive plants. Many plants in the United States were originally introduced for agricultural or ornamental use, but then have become invasive and crowd out native plants. Introduced plants are more likely to become invasive in regions with soil and climate conditions similar to those of their native habitat. Here is a partial list of invasive plants found in North Carolina. You've likely seen some of these plants growing along the Outer Banks, such as the highly visible August and Russian olive shrubs, or the Japanese honeysuckle vines that grow on top of trees and shrubs. One of the most important things gardeners can do to protect local ecosystems is to identify and remove invasive plants from your property and to avoid planting species that have a high potential to become invasive. In addition to concerns about invasive plants taking over the landscape, development across the United States has led to loss of natural areas. While this has had clear economic benefits by providing housing, shops and services, and transportation networks that we need, it has also resulted in loss of natural areas that previously sustained native plants and animals. Newly built housing developments are often planted with plain turf grass. Homeowners can have an important role in restoring habitat that has been lost to development. Turf grass is often found in home landscapes, but it has little to no role in supporting ecosystems and is resource intensive to maintain. Research done by Dr. Doug Tallamy at the University of Delaware found that 92% of randomly selected suburban landscapes are planted primarily in turf grass. Grass watering represents 30% of all water used in summer in the east and 60% in the west. Approximately 40 to 60% of lawn fertilizer ends up in our surface and groundwater. Dr. Tallamy notes that if just half of the lawns in the United States were converted to native plant communities, we could, quote, collectively restore ecosystem function to more than 20 million acres of what is now ecological wasteland, end of quote. He suggests thinking of lawns as an area rug instead of wall-to-wall carpet. Just imagine the profusion of bees, butterflies, and birds that can live on the plants in a natural habitat compared to a turf grass lawn. Lawns typically consist of one non-native species of turf grass, which doesn't do much for wildlife. You can consider using ground covers or replacing some of the lawn with flowering perennials. For shady spots, ferns provide foraging space and shelter for ground-feeding birds, while creatures such as frogs and turtles like to hide in them. Wild ginger is another good ground cover option for shady areas. A sunny spot is great for flowering perennials, that is, flowers that bloom year after year. Native grasses like pink muhly grass are another low-maintenance option. You can also reduce your lawn size by expanding mulch around trees and flower beds. You can minimize turf grass to appropriate areas, such as those that are relatively flat and have heavy usage, and the areas that get sun for at least 4 hours a day. To save water, allow your turf grass to go dormant during drought. It will come back. If you're concerned about weeds popping up, remember that they often provide important food resources for pollinators like bees. If you do use a turf grass, consider a warm season grass that's well suited to the coastal environment and that doesn't require much treatment. Centipede grass requires minimal fertilizer and less mowing compared to Bermuda grass, zoysia grass, or St. Augustine grass. Well, we've talked about our local ecosystems and the benefits of native plants. Now let's focus on some of the specific things to consider when adding native plants to your yard. For example, what are your goals? Do you like to watch butterflies, bees, and birds visiting your garden? Do you need privacy and screening of an unsightly view? Perhaps your main focus is on having a yard that works well for kids or pets to play. Or maybe you have low-lying areas that hold water, or areas that run off into canals or the Sound. Depending on the need, you can select native plants that will help you achieve your goals. We will now talk about some yard examples and some of the plants that might work in each yard. Our first example is a yard that gets lots of wind, making it challenging to keep more delicate plants alive and raising concerns about storm resiliency. Windy yards will need trees that have high wind resistance, tough shrubs that can act as wind blocks, and herbaceous plants that tolerate salt winds. The plants listed here are just a few examples, and I will talk about a few of these in more detail. The live oak is especially emblematic of the Outer Banks. It is a majestic, long-lived evergreen oak that can reach anywhere from 40 to 80 feet tall. It loves the full sun and tolerates all soil types as long as there is good drainage. It is highly salt tolerant and wind resistant and will persevere even in areas right near the beach, where the wind will shape these trees into beautiful flowing shapes. It blooms with tiny, inconspicuous gold, yellow, or green catkins in the early spring that attract many pollinators. It is the host plant for several hairstreak and dusky-winged butterflies. It not only provides shelter and protection for local and migratory songbirds during winter and severe storms, the acorns that appear in the fall are a great food source for woodpeckers, blue jays, and small mammals. If you choose a live oak for your yard, you'll want to plan for its mature size and keep it well pruned while it is young to encourage branches that grow horizontally or upward, but not so low to the ground that they hit you on the head. The Yaupon holly is a wonderful shrub that grows well in many settings, from sandy woods to brackish and tidal marsh shorelines to dunes, maritime forests, and shrub thickets. The red berries feed birds and small mammals. In your yard, it can be hedged, trimmed to a pyramidal shape, or can be grown into a tree form by pruning lower branches from the main trunks. Yaupons can grow surprisingly tall. In areas with persistent winds, it makes an excellent windbreak, allowing you to plant perennials and annuals behind them out of the wind. A rule of thumb used by landscapers is that each foot of height will shelter 6 feet of area downwind from the taller shrub. Seaside goldenrod is a perennial plant that grows in full sun and tolerates all types of soils. It is highly salt tolerant and drought tolerant once established. The blooms begin appearing in August through October. It is an important food source for the migrating butterflies that travel the Atlantic coastal flyway. It is also the host plant for many overwintering gall-producing insects. Gall larvae provide excellent sources of nutrition in the winter for birds such as the Carolina chickadee or various woodpeckers. You'll see native goldenrod blooming beautifully in natural areas in the fall. It will grow even more profusely in a home garden. In our second yard example, we're looking for plants that can be used to screen out a view or add privacy. Perhaps your yard borders a road or looks out onto electrical equipment, or maybe you're next door to a busy rental property. You will want to look for plants that provide some height and that are evergreen. The American holly is easily grown in average, consistently moist, acidic, well-drained soils in full sun to part shade. It will tolerate a broad range of soil conditions, but does not like flooding or soils that stay saturated with moisture. In our hot summer climate, having afternoon shade is ideal. Pay close attention to the eventual size of the American holly, up to 15 to 30 feet wide and 40 to 60 feet tall. With its limbs that grow all the way to the ground, it makes a great privacy screen, but it does need space to grow. Southern Magnolia is a broadleaf evergreen tree that can grow to 60 to 80 feet tall. It prefers full sun but will tolerate some shade. It grows best in moist conditions in well-drained soil, but will tolerate wet feet for a time. It is highly salt tolerant, so it is great for coastal areas. The fragrant blooms attract all types of pollinators. The seed pods are eaten by birds and small mammals. This tree also provides much-needed cover during the winter in severe storms. Deer do not usually bother it. As an evergreen, it would be a good choice for an area of your yard where you'd like the plantings to screen a bad view. The coral honeysuckle is a fast-growing, woody, semi-evergreen vine. It has long tubular flowers that range from coral red to orange red and may be lined with yellow. Coral honeysuckle is a larval host to the hummingbird clearwing moth. Various songbirds, including cedar waxwings, catbirds, and cardinals, feed on its round red berries, and hummingbirds seek its nectar. Unlike its invasive relative, the Japanese honeysuckle, coral honeysuckle is not aggressive. This vine grows well on a trellis, fence, or on the horizontals of a raised house, and thus would make a nice privacy screen. There is a beautiful example of this vine at the main entrance to the Outer Banks Arboretum and Teaching Garden. Our final yard example is one where the homeowner really wants to enjoy seeing birds, bees, butterflies, and other insects flitting from plant to plant, and likes having colorful blooms and berries throughout the year. The American beautyberry is a personal favorite. It is a woody, deciduous perennial shrub that produces showy purple fruits in the fall. If you like to see birds in your yard, then this is the shrub for you. Catbirds, mockingbirds, and migrating warblers all love the berries. The beautyberry prefers full sun. It will grow in all types of soil provided there is good drainage. It grows 4 to 8 feet tall and wide, so allow for plenty of space between each shrub. It responds very well to annual pruning in late winter. Which will help it maintain a manageable size and leafy appearance. In the spring, green leaves emerge on upright arching stems. Clusters of small flowers bloom on the stems during the late spring and early summer, followed by clusters of purplish to bluish berries that encircle the stem in fall. The fruits may last through early winter, depending on how hungry your bird friends are. Butterfly weed of the species Asclepias tuberosa is a lovely, bright orange flowering plant that is a larval host for monarch butterflies, and also serves as a nectar source for bees and several other butterflies. It may take a while to become established, but once it is growing, it is long-lived. Threadleaf Coreopsis is a native perennial in the daisy family that grows in dense, bushy clumps. It may grow 2 to 3 feet tall with a similar spread. These plants survive and thrive in infertile, sandy, and rocky soils and tolerate drought, low levels of salt, infertile soil, heat, and humidity. Interestingly, if the soil is too rich or moist, the stems become weak and the plants will flop. The clumps will spread by rhizomes and can be divided every 2 to 3 years. It will also self-seed. Shearing the plant after blooming will sometimes produce fall flowers. This plant provides an airy appearance to a sunny border, naturalized area, native garden, or in mass plantings. Its long blooming season provides a profusion of daisy-like yellow flowers. It is an easy care plant that will give you years of enjoyment. Panicum virgatum, or switchgrass, is a fast-growing perennial grass common in many coastal dune and marsh environments. It reaches 3 to 4 feet tall, and with its flower plumes, it can measure up to 7 feet tall. It forms a dense, columnar foliage clump that can spread slowly through creeping rhizomes, and it remains attractive year-round. It has a bluish cast in the summer and is topped by finely textured, pink-tinged, branched flower panicles that hover over the foliage like a cloud. After the flowers go to seed, leave them on the plant to provide a winter food source for birds and small mammals. The leaves will turn attractive shades of yellow-orange in the fall, and then the leaves will fade to light brown and persist through the winter. Prune switchgrass backs severely in late winter to early spring. Different cultivars will grow to different heights, so you'll want to pay close attention to the mature size when selecting this plant for your garden. I have talked about just a few of the native plants you might consider for use in your yard. Let's now go through some additional resources that may help you plan your own garden. You can see many native plants growing at the Outer Banks Arboretum and Teaching Garden, behind the Baum Center in Kill Devil Hills, or on the grounds of the Coastal Studies Institute in Wanchese. To learn more about individual plants, check out the North Carolina Extension Gardener Toolbox. You can use the filters to look for just native plants, and then further refine to look for plants that do well along the coast or that match the general conditions in your yard. When you're ready to buy native plants, it is recommended that you seek out sources that propagate their own native plants rather than trying to collect them from the wild. Nursery propagated native plants are more likely to survive than transplants from the wild. The North Carolina Botanical Garden website has a great list of native plant nursery sources from across the United States. Here locally, you may wish to attend the Coastal Gardening Festival on May 14th, when plants grown by master gardener volunteers, including many native plants, will be available for sale. For all plants you purchase, check the labels and plant information carefully to be sure the plants will match the sun, moisture, soil, and space conditions in your yard. Another great resource for planning home gardens is the Coastal Landscapes Initiative, which has developed a series of landscaping design templates for use in your own coastal garden or yard that you can download from their website. Each design can be modified to meet local lot configurations, and alternative plant choices are provided for flexibility. 2 types of designs are included in this series: borders and screens. Screens block unwanted views and increase privacy. Ideal locations for screens are along the street front, between houses, or in front of fences, air conditioners, trash cans, gas tanks, anything else you'd rather not look at. Borders define edges and organize spaces in your yard, but also can work as standalone gardens. Ideal locations are along walkways, driveways, fences, or road frontage. For example, here's a coastal landscaping template to provide privacy screening. This semi-evergreen border with sweet bay magnolia, coneflowers, and goldenrod is a good choice for increasing privacy at your home or blocking an unsightly view year-round. For several years while the trees are still young, the perennial flowers planted at the base will give plenty of sun to bloom throughout the spring, summer, and fall, attracting pollinators and other beneficial insects. In the fall and winter, birds will forage on the flower's seeds. Here's another example. The intent of the filter strip design is to filter out sediment, pollutants, and nutrients from stormwater before it flows into a water body. Good locations include along ditches or swales, along the shore of a pond, or at the very top of a seawall. All of the coastal landscaping design templates describe the number and type of plants in the design, as well as spacing and layout. The plants are color-coded and labeled with dimensions. Another product that the Coastal Landscaping Initiative offers is a guide to coastal landscaping in North Carolina. It features 34 native plants, ranging from trees, shrubs, and grasses to vines and flowers, and includes brief descriptions about each one. And it also offers information on the coastal conditions that each plant is most suited to. You can pick up one of these booklets at the area libraries or by sending a request to Ask a Master Gardener at greenlineobx@gmail.com or at North Carolina Sea Grant's website. Finally, let's review some general principles that will maximize the chance that your new native plants will thrive in your yard. First, select plants that fit the sun, shade, water, and soil conditions in your yard and that will fit in the space you have available. Having 3 to 5 plants of the same species will create good foraging areas for insects, and having a diverse selection of plants that bloom throughout the growing season will add beauty throughout the year. You can shrink the size of your turf grass area to make room for some native ground covers or planting beds, or you can add colorful annuals to augment the native plants between seasons. In the first year, give your new plants extra attention, providing about 1 inch of water per week and adding about 2 inches of mulch. You will need to have some patience as you add new native trees, shrubs, and perennial plants to your yard. It may take a year or two for planting beds to fill in, and up to 5 years for shrubs and trees to become well established. In the end, you'll be rewarded by a sustainable coastal landscape that supports our local ecosystems and gives you the special joy of seeing nature up close. Thank you for watching today. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.